Oh, we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the LJL Officially Unofficial Podcast, Season 2, Episode 30. Gentlemen, can you believe I've done 63 of these now?
Oof, that is tenure right there.
Oh,
That's a lot. That is
that's
almost as many as the number in Nintendo 64.
not quite, though, because
Not
that's
quite.
a
Barely.
very big deal. And to our audio listeners out there, you might be like, wait a moment, I heard some unfamiliar voices. Absolutely. Well, I am Alex, otherwise known as Lexi by MaskedSwan on the internet. I am joined by the one and only color commentator that's been with me all summer and has already done a few guest appearances on this podcast, Melvinizzle. Hello, Callum. Welcome back to the podcast.
Good to be here. I love podcasting. It's just fun, nice and quaint. Not any of like the stress, of you're watching and have to pay attention to everything. Right now, I only have to pay attention to two voices. That's great.
And only half, really. It's the other one that you're probably going to listen to a little bit more. It's our guest that's been on 2 finals broadcasts with us and appeared on semi-finals here. A brilliant friend of the show, Joushi. Welcome back.
Hello. I think this is my first time on the podcast, but
think it is, yeah.
it's good to be here. I think my favorite podcast fact I've ever heard is I think this is an old tweet that probably everybody is familiar with at this point, but someone was saying, "Did you know you have a bunch of geese? It's called a wedge, but a group of men is called a podcast."
Oh. That makes total sense because I am both these things. Ladies and gentlemen, episode 30 is a go. Gentlemen, I don't know if you quite know, but we've switched up, changed it, and reversed it how we've always used to do our podcast. Recently, we've changed it in a new direction. And I'm just going to come over to both of you and go, how you doing? What have you been doing this last week? How's things been?
I mean, we obviously had finals. That was pretty big.
Yep.
Finals. I wasn't on the semi-finals, but I was watching it eagerly and stressfully because, my predictions didn't fare too well.
No,
not great.
Outside of LJL, how you been though, Callum?
Outside of that, been pretty good. Just been chilling for the most part, trying to prepare some showreel stuff. Fingers crossed on that one.
Ooh, exciting. And Joushi, I know Academy over in the LCS is warming up, and that's where a lot of your time, I expect, has been going, but you were recently on a flight as well.
On a flight. Yeah, I was in New Jersey last weekend for what was supposed to be the LCS finals originally, but I was doing a job with Grubhub. And this weekend, my cousin's been in town. So, that's been chewing up a lot of my time. He and I have been hanging out. We used to be roommates down in Los
Oh, cool.
Angeles about a year and a half ago. COVID time really flies. But having him back has been a lot of fun, just meaning I'm getting to see like all the rest of my family again for like the first time since COVID hit.
It's crazy when you kind of get to take a step back and kind of reflect and be like, Jesus, it's been a very long time for everything, and COVID's been going on. I remember when it first happened all the way back in March and February, March time, and people were like, it's only going to last like a week or two or a month at most. And yeah,
We're still here. Been closer to 2 years than one.
Yes. Oh God, that's depressing. For myself, I have been playing a little bit more Final Fantasy 14. I've been playing a little bit of poker on the side. I enjoyed that, though. Poker pretty much closed for me the moment that IRL stuff stopped because your boy only wants to play IRL because it's just a degen playing online. You're just throwing away money. So that's not what I've been doing. Outside of that, yeah, it's just lots of LJL Academy for me and LJL Spring semi-finals and finals. So busy time for all three of us. Now, Callum, you know exactly what I'm coming over to you for, because what should certain people on audio platforms, what should certain people on YouTube be doing for me, for you, for Joushi, and for everybody else?
Well, I've heard that there's this little thing called Twitter, and I think, if I recall correctly, below all of us, there's these little tags that you should all make sure to follow. Listen, add that little ringing the bell thing so you know when we're tweeting. And then, we've got the LJL Officially Unofficial account. That's the one that you really got to follow, though. Follow this Twitch. I don't think we can subscribe to it, can we? That one's one I'm not 100% sure.
You can definitely follow. You can hit that follow button.
Keep your eye out.
Yeah, keep the eye out. Absolutely. I like that.
And then, all the places where you would normally listen to this podcast, every good audio platform, You can make sure to download, rate 5 stars, and give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment. That engagement is really what helps. Make sure you join the Discord community, because that is where we can talk to you about the region we all love.
Perfect as always, Melvinizzle. Thank you so much for doing that. If they also rate us 5 stars on Amazon and give not on Amazon, on Apple Podcasts, and they give us a review, they'll get a little shout out. We haven't got one for this week, but hey, people, learn, do that. Be good. Anyway, let's get into this week's episode, gentlemen. Top of the hour of everything, we need to talk about the news, because it is the 5 o'clock news, except it's like the 5:20 news for me and Melvinizzle right this moment. It's probably the 9:20 LA Times news.
These are roughly news hours.
It's true. The morning news.
Yeah, we're kind of actually in a perfect news time. Gentlemen, the world's location was kind of leaked. It's not confirmed. We will do that. It's not been confirmed. There was a lot of Chinese buildings in the trailer that they recently showed, and I was like, things got changed. All we know for sure is that play-ins are going to be starting on the 5th, and that groups will be starting on the 11th. A full schedule has been posted, and it does seem a little bit rushed. I'm just happy that we are still getting a Worlds. I don't know about you guys. What are your thoughts on kind of the dates and kind of how the announcements has been done so far?
Well, honestly, I kind of like that the schedule is a little bit faster.
Mm.
I've always felt that Worlds kind of takes really long, and the breaks in between, like I respect that we get the highest quality games from having these week-long breaks between like semifinals and finals and or quarters and semis and yada yada yada. But it also, for me, it ends up meaning that there's just a lot of time where I kind of forget that it's happening. And this
Yeah.
faster schedule means that, I'm going to be tuned in for longer, and I think that's going to be really good for most of the people who are going to be watching.
What
That's
about you,
fair.
Callum?
I feel like it's better when it's a bit quicker, because you kind of get to see the teams adapt on the fly. I know it's not as good for the teams themselves. I believe there's only a 2-day gap between the end of play-ins and the start of the actual group stage, which is going to be rough, to say the least, for everybody that gets out of there. That is going to be a busy couple weeks' time. So best of luck to all the players for that kind of thing. But as a viewer, it is much nicer having it constantly going, because particularly for the semi-final to final week, I feel like it's just that kind of, I'm excited leading up to the semis, and then after that, it's one match. I'm waiting for one match for a week, which is good, but most of the time it doesn't really deliver in our finals historically for Worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also kind of want to throw back to like when international tournaments were super common, like back in season 2, right? We would have tournaments with oftentimes like these quality of teams are better, and it would be 3 days, right? Like everything you
Yeah.
would happen super, super quickly. And I feel like I've always felt like, as a fighting game player myself, I've been to a lot of Smash tournaments, is the ability to adapt quickly, and the stamina that comes along with like playing through a long event is kind of something that we've lost a little bit. Now, I'm not saying I want Worlds to happen over 3 days, but realistically, this is a tournament that could happen in 2 weeks, and it would, obviously have very different incentives in how you play, but I think it's worth noting that it is very different from how we used to play League of Legends, and we know that that used to work and people used to love it.
Yeah,
Um,
I do think
so
back
I
to the Go for Pro days and all those tournament series that were way back when, where it really does incentivize, hey, adaptation, and just spike at the right time for a realistic amount of time, and then cool off afterwards, because you can only play at your absolute peak for so long, right? Like you can't do it
Yeah.
for hours and hours and hours.
I think that's kind of what happens a lot when you have these like week breaks in between the later stages of the tournament, where if you think about just semi-finals going into finals, right?
Yep.
Who is actually going to be chain scrimming around the time of World's finals apart from the finalist, which can sometimes lead to, a couple 3-0s against our European favor, but, happens.
We get there. We at least get there, right?
Yeah, we get there. That's the win. We've got
We-
6 games and finals over the past 3 years. We'll take those.
We take those. We're stealing them from NA. It's something. Even though NA is my main region. Joushi, honestly, LCS is my main region outside of LJL at this point.
Wow.
I've always been a TSM boy. Always been a TSM boy, for better or for worse.
Rough year.
Hey, it was good way back in the days of TSM Snapdragon. Those were the days. But yeah, let's just move on to play-ins because that's LJL related, and this is an LJL podcast.
It is?
So it is, yeah, absolutely. I believe it or not, it is. So currently, it's just been a very casual podcast. Let's head over and give our thoughts about some of the play-in teams. Currently, we know that every team is confirmed. If you want to check along with us, I recommend just going over to the wiki, the fandom wiki. Those guys over there, they do incredible work. They very much make all of us entertainers look better. Because of their work. So we got LNG Esports for the Chinese fourth seed. We got Hunway Life with Chovy, the Church of Chovy, for the Korean fourth seed. Rogue most likely actually going to be in the group stage, but we'll put Rogue in this group for us for now. Cloud9 Beyond Gaming from the PCS. Unicorns of Love coming back from the CIS or the UOL. Right? Infinity Esports back from the LLA. That's a rematch for us as well with Unicorns of Love. We've got... Callum, can you do that one for me? The Turkish number 1 seed? Because
Galatasaray Esports. I apologize, any Turkish fans watching. I tried my best.
Yes, that's a name. That's a word that is not English, so I suck at it. Or Japanese, as it's the only other language I'm like, I will go above and beyond to try and attempt. Candice?
Candids?
Candids, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously
Dogs.
the favorites to get out of play-ins, Detonation Focus Me, and then everybody's favorite location, the... Oh god, wait, no, I was about to go OPL, and then it's not the OPL anymore, it's the...
DoorDash LCO.
Thank you.
DoorDash. Yes. Peace Esports in actually a really cracking 5-game series versus Pentanet. That was actually a really good one to watch. But Peace came out victorious. Gentlemen, what's some of your thoughts coming out into this playing stage? What's your first thoughts for Detonation Focus Me's hopes for getting out as well?
Honestly, doable, actually. The more I look at it, like, from the teams that I do know on there, I can 100% see games getting dropped here. I could see Humble Life not having it together for a game and getting knocked down. Never, not gonna happen. I could see LNG having a rough time, maybe another 0-7 Renekton mid game. They still won that one in fairness, but point being, I could definitely see there are weaknesses. Cloud9, they've obviously had their downfall in recent time, but I still think all of these teams are obviously very impressive when they're peaking, so it's going to be a lot about current form.
I feel like last year and the year before that, and probably the year before that, I've kind of built a reputation amongst my friends as having no idea what is happening in other wildcard regions that are not Japan and Oceania. Right? I remember very specifically, I think it was a couple years back, Unicorns of Love or the CIS representative had just recently undergone like some major roster changes. And so I looked at what they were the year prior, and they still had like Diamond Procs on the team. They had I think they still had Edward, and then they came out with a couple new people, and they struggled through the regular season. And to me, that implied like, oh, this team is probably not as strong this year as they were last year. They lost a couple of their star members. They didn't have as a very dominant regular season. And then they came in and smashed everyone. And we were like, oh, they are very good. And what was the other team last year that had like major roster changes in plans because two of their members couldn't make it?
The PSG team, or was it somebody else?
Yeah, that was the PSG team.
I think it was
they
PSG,
couldn't play with Maple for something,
had, like,
right?
Yeah. And then they were way better with their subs than they were with their main roster.
And then they had one of those subs again for MSI, didn't they? If I'm not wrong. It was that unlucky players, must say, but very good performance from that team.
Yeah, so it's a situation where like I feel like Detonation Focus Me. I've typically said that they are the strongest of the bottom 4 weak regions. I think that this might be a situation where they are, you know, a lot better than that because of how dominant that they've been. And when we see that they're taking things seriously, they look really, really strong. So I think that there is a real chance that they make it out, especially if they get a group draw against some of the traditional Pool 2 teams that
Yeah.
I think they're now on par with or better than.
I really do feel like copium is going through my veins, but at the same time, I just look at this lineup and I'm like, DFM just on paper, I'm like, they should be a team going through. Like,
They can compete, like, by far, and
the
when you
fact is,
have that much
we
veterancy,
proved half
exactly.
of it right back at MSI, and that was when we were nervous far more. Or I think all three of us were. Well, me and Joushi were more nervous. Melvin, you were probably just looking at Twitter, going, "Man, some of my friends really want DFM to win."
I was following them eagerly through that, and it was a tense ride, I will say. Some of the was it the Damn One game?
The damn one
that
game,
Yeah,
dude. Oh,
we don't
tested my faith.
happened. We don't need to see them in play-ins, so you know what? They're out of sight, out of mind for the moment.
Yeah. That said, though, I do want to, further say, like, I am looking through the rosters of all the play-in teams right now, and typically I recognize a couple of the players from each of the teams, but this
Yeah.
year I actually don't recognize a lot of them, which is I've gotten into a lot of trouble saying, like, if I don't know who they are, they're probably not good. And usually that's pretty good, but not at the world stage, right?
Agreed.
Just because I don't know them doesn't mean they're not super sick, right? It just means that
Yeah.
I'm not following a lot of these other wildcard regions. Like, even though I'm not following China super heavily, I still know Ole, Tarzan, Icon, Lightning, Wandy, right?
Yeah.
I still know Dudu, Morgan, Willer, Chovy, Deft, and Vista. Vista, I don't even know how you say it, right? But I know who these players are just
Mm.
because you kind of get a chance to see it as you watch, like, some of the other games that are
Yeah,
happening
Get
you
in the
hear about
mentioned
region.
them, you see
elsewhere.
them. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're out and about, they're around, but it is like well, I think it was one of the biggest ones, and I'm looking forward to actually talking with one of the experts from the region. But the Brazilian representatives was like a fourth seed that made it through playoffs. Like the top teams like fell out, and they ended up having two rookie squads in their finals. And it's like that is great for the region. That is great for prospecting talent. That is great for your future. Good luck at play-ins, because DFM are not here to play around, and they're gonna just stomp a team like that. I do think we are a little bit draw dependent, very similar to how last Worlds went. I do think there's a world where V3 could have done slightly better. They didn't high roll, they didn't low roll. It was kind of a weird spot for V3, but I'm very excited to see how play-ins will be conducted, because sadly we still don't have any news from Riot Japan, Riot Games in general, what's going to be happening with that. So we don't know what's happening with Vietnam. We don't know what's happening with those two slots. Hey guys, if we have a really good performance, do you think we could take the second slot from
Ooh.
VCS and add it to our collection?
I think we have to do really well for that to be the
Oh
case,
yeah, no, we
right?
make it out of groups. We have to make it out of groups, right?
Probably does it, right? I don't know, like, how the whole reason behind it is that it's meant to be behind the scenes, because it's a lot of things that we can't really track. And I'm just looking at it thinking, I could see it being a pretty damn good competition. And I'm kind of playing the mini game in my head of, since it's meant to be Iceland was the rumored location.
Yes.
I'm just thinking about how these teams have historically performed on European solo queue. And as I recall, I believe the DFM squad did pretty damn well on European solo queue,
Top
just
10
for a
for a
practice
good
environment.
long while.
They
Yeah.
were having a hell of a time, which I know certain showmaker types weren't having that much fun on the European solo queue. So it's about mental resilience for a lot of it.
On top of that, Gang is normally one of their better solo queue players who didn't actually get to go. Kazu didn't have a great time at solo queue.
Believable.
We can all understand that. Thank you, Kazu. Every time I will say thank you, Kazu, because Jesus, the fact is, you guys made it to Worlds with your sub.
God's work.
They did so much. I mean, hey, they beat Cloud9 with their coach. Mithy hasn't done that. When's Mithy doing that?
Sad because of how clear a parallel that is.
I know, that's why I made it. It was perfect. It was just there. Gentlemen, I think we could probably do another 30 minutes just talking about play-ins, worlds, and everything else. And we might do that one day in the future. Who knows? There's many podcasts still to go until we get to worlds. But we should start doing a bit of this recap, which is actually the whole point of this episode. We're going to recap Detonation Focus Me facing off against Axis, some of the headlines, some notes and thoughts that I had about this series and anything that you two also have. And then we will do the P La Resistance. That is the finals for Rascal Jester facing off against Detonation Focus Me. Obviously, there are some direct comparisons and thoughts that we can make in regards to that Juggernaut match and everything. The players gave us some thoughts. Who wants to take it first from either of you? The fact that DFM went 3-0 versus Axis and they got pushed and it wasn't flawless, but it was convincing. At least for me.
My 3-2 Axis prediction kind of makes me feel obligated that I should at least start this one off because to argue for myself, it was a lot of hopium. It was a lot of hopium. I became a massive fan of Axis throughout the split, and it certainly didn't hurt the fact that Sengoku Chain disappointed me so much. But this team, I didn't have the full expectation that they were the favorites, right? But it was the kind of thing of I believed in DFM's form. They showed their form. They went on and explained why they didn't perform so well in that Juggernaut match. We can talk about that later on. But in this series, I feel like basically every player on Axis put on a pretty compelling argument in their own way. Like, I know in the first game on that Renekton was a monster. I think they did everything you physically could, especially after getting bashed in by Ebby's set level 1. And then after that, Megaman had a good game. There was a couple times where they got picked off by standard Rise and Nidalee combo, which was sad to watch, but near unavoidable after a point. I wouldn't say Honey had the best of games in the first 2, but overall, especially in game 3, Honey was a monster.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I've scrolled through these VODs at 2 times speed at this point after missing them live, and the biggest thing that I took away from that is what happened to Evie, man?
I think
had a rough
he
day.
he had a Windows screen going off in his brain and he just blue screened a little bit with this sat pick. It was a bit weird, champ, for sure.
I definitely thought it was interesting, and I know we were talking about it a bit more about the champion pool that he has kind of looking towards Worlds, but it definitely felt rather odd seeing how well Ino was doing and how poorly Evie was actually doing, and it felt really uncharacteristic from the team of DFM, and I think that's part of why even though it was a very clear DFM victory, the games felt a lot closer than they otherwise would have been, is because somebody just showed up and had an off day.
And that happens, right? You can just show up and just have a bad day, but the rest of your team still did it. And we are dunking on Ebby a little bit. Like game 1 and game 3
coincided with a really good performance from Ino, right? It was not just one; it was definitely a bit of both.
And it's also the fact that game 1 and game 3 were probably the worst Ebby, or the less ideal Ebby performances. He was kind of not a huge deal. Granted, game number 3, he definitely played a huge important role into just kind of making Axis doing stupid stuff, especially towards the end. But game number 2, he was a critical member in that just 24-minute stomp fest. Like he just took it to Ino like there was no tomorrow, and his strategies did work. And I don't know. Ebby has played a lot of champions throughout his years because he has played so many games. He has played over 389 professional games of League of Legends. Guy has a large champion pool in a region that doesn't have the most amount of games either. Played for over 6 years. I'll be honest. Am I right in thinking that I don't think this is a narrative, by the way, that was brought to us by our newcasters, Joushi. So this is something where I was like, I never thought about this, but then a bunch of our newcasters have come in and gone, they only play 4 champion. I'm like, yeah, but he has more, but then they never show it. Is that something I should be worried about, or do you think, nah, Ebby's always got it in the back pocket?
Uh, Honestly, I've been of the opinion that this is the biggest downfall of DFM for a long time. It used to be Sarah's
Right.
champion pool because not
Oh
only
yeah,
was he not
always.
playing like the meta champions, he was playing weird not meta champions, right?
Mm.
That, very clearly you banned the Heimerdinger. I am still worried that now that
Okay.
Saros is off the team, Evie's champion pool is going to be the easiest place to attack, right?
Mm.
Over the course of his career, he's got like uh a ton of games, and he has 56 Gnar games in his career, and his next highest is Renekton at 19, right? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
they're
and
just
the time
not
clinch isn't too far off and everything else. It's like, oh
yeah,
god.
I'm
there's
gonna
not
follow you on
that
that.
many champions that he plays.
Exactly. He's got 7 games, 7 champions this split that he's played more than one game of, and then 5 1-ofs in there, which is not sorry, this split, this whole season. So that
Mm.
includes the MSI, I believe, looking at Games of Legends
It
right
will.
now, and
Yep.
that's it's a playable number. You could work around it, but it definitely is something that all it takes is a team, could be any team, looking at it in drafting, going, "Hey guys, if we just like hard focus this person out and pick ban, and they're not practiced on this pick, it could go poorly." I say that also looking at these champions for the split. He has the lowest win rate on the Gnar out of his top 4 at 66.7. Everything else is 85% and above.
Well,
Again,
then we
relative
just know
competition,
that
but
he lost
still.
those at the first 3 games of, the
Yeah,
summer split, right? I don't know, I can't
still
actually remember the
impressive.
scoreboards. Oh, absolutely, it still is. How should Axis be feeling about this? Because like, they lost 3-0, guys. Like, to bring it back to the series as a whole, I feel like Axis should still feel pretty good about this loss, even though they did lose. They still got 3rd place, and that's like an org first. Like, after
Insane.
going past the
Insane.
first round, it was an org first, and the fact that they went on and did it again versus V3 Esports was just huge.
I understand why none of the players would be happy going 0-3 on the day and
Of
whatnot.
course.
It's never a good feeling to lose in a big match like that, knowing they were so close to not only the finals but worlds.
Mm.
And I think that given time, once they get past that initial just slump of emotion, they will only be happy with this result. If anything, it might even light a fire under them to do even better next time, because just subverting expectations, really. Like, a team that nobody in out of our entire group of predictions had above 5th, getting
E-
3rd.
Well, that was a bot. That was random.org. No
Yeah,
one
exactly. It was a hefty
actually.
swing. It was a hefty
Yeah.
swing.
What about you,
Yeah.
Joshi?
I mean, I think it's on the one hand, for an organization that has typically not gotten above I think their best performance was like 5th in 2020,
Yeah.
where they weren't like basically dead last. This is a huge improvement, and they did it with basically the same roster from spring to summer, right?
Yep.
I don't think they actually received any changes, so that's a really impressive
Yeah, they didn't
improvement. And
even
one
play
of the
that
reasons,
one game of Dicey. So yeah, no, this
yeah,
was like complete roster.
it and that's really impressive, right? I think it does go to show that as teams figure it out, or as like meta shifts into their favor, this exact same team can have wildly different results over different periods of time. And I feel like this is a situation where we get to see that firsthand. Like, these players were not good in spring, or this
No.
team was not good in spring. This team in summer was quite good. And so, if nothing else, the improvement that we saw from a lot of their players over the course of even just 1 year is really impressive. How should they feel about it? On the one hand, you gotta make sure that your expectations are realistic. This team was basically never going to go to Worlds, right? Even if they beat DFM, I don't think that they beat Rascal Jester coming out, right? That is a monumental task. So just a
Unlikely.
massive improvement to me should be something that we should applaud them for.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously there is a small sign that Hoglet potentially is going to be leaving and kind of leaving on a high. A player that has been playing in the LJL for about 2 years at this point. But he has been playing. He's had a rather strong career. Already been to Worlds. He did that over with the LLA and All Knights. Came over to the LJL, joined Axis. He's been playing professionally for about 4 or 5 years. It seems like they potentially might be hanging up the boots, though we won't know. Hoglet was only signed, so his contract is ending in November. So we'll find out probably 2 weeks before the OGL starts, because that's when we actually
Yep.
finally find out rosters. Because Yeah, it's fun to
Yeah.
live in purgatory for 3 months,
Just
whereas
builds the tension. It's like
No,
that
it
extra week to
doesn't.
World Finals.
It's not fair that EU and NA do all these cool roster things. LPL do it, LCK. I know the LLA they're like super on it, and then Japan's like, yeah, we're gonna leave you for the last 2 weeks. Joshi, do you know why that is, or is it just like a weird thing the region's fallen into?
I think it's just a weird thing as far as
Oh,
I
okay,
can.
sure.
Their trading windows are the same.
Yeah.
But I also think that they just, all of their companies are like really tight-lipped, right? You just do not reveal what is going on, and they're very good at clamping down on making sure that leaks don't happen until they
Mm,
come out. So I'm
yeah.
sure that the roster changes happen a lot earlier than we find out about them, but we just don't know about them until it feels like the week before things start. Like, please, I just want to know where my players are going.
Well, we'll have to try and find one day. Hopefully, the three of us, as well with everyone else that we do the LJL OU with, maybe we can try and get an inside source, and we can at least be aware of things so we can prepare things. That's what we want. We just want to be able to prepare
I
content.
just want to make you look better.
Yeah,
Please.
we do. Legit, that's it. I think the last thing I really want to cover for this series, and we will call back to this series against the Rascal Jester one. It's the Aria post-game thoughts that he went through. And for Aria, and for Donation Focus Me, this was a really important matchup because truly it was like make or break for them, because when they lost to Rascal Jester and they were asked about it, he was like, I'm not going to talk about that series. I don't want to talk about the Juggernaut series. All I care about is making worlds. I want my worlds ticket. This is what I had to do to get there. They go in to their next matchup, and Aria, after that interview, I was like, man, he wants blood. Like, he wants Rascal Jester's blood. And gentlemen, actually, let's talk about Rascal Jesters versus DFM, because, well, gentlemen, it was a stomp, wasn't it?
He got the blood. He got a lot of blood. There was a lot of blood, especially in that last game. Oh no.
Well, there was
He
a lot of blood
played-
in that first game, and it was just, yeah. I think they opened up a wound. And yeah, just what's your thoughts, guys? Because I've been chatting crap for the last 2 minutes, so go for it.
Yeah. Look, it'll be my turn to start crap. I don't feel like Rascal Jester actually showed up to the finals. I think a
Agreed.
bunch of their members just kind of rolled over and died, and it was, as happy as I am
And the
that we get
Java
to
are
see
you talking
DFM go to
about?
Worlds, their draft was not particularly strong. Their play was not particularly strong. Like, the normal people that I look at to have really good games for this team are Soul and Secret, and I feel like Secret never got champions where he's particularly proficient on and can get things started until game 3, and then Hachamacha, like, we talked a lot about it on the cast. He didn't do anything the
Yeah,
entire series. And
he played
normally we're used to having,
Nocturne
like,
and didn't press R.
yeah, we're
Stupid
used to him
Jarvan,
having a
you mean?
decent early game, but he didn't even have that.
You know what I think Hachimecha missed? He missed the post-game interview with Ino when he had his 7-0-8 Nocturne game, and Ino leaked the secret for all pro players. So I'm just gonna let everybody know here if they missed that interview. He pressed R whenever it wasn't on cooldown. He just, the
Oh.
moment it came off cooldown, he just went R, find a target, done. That's all the man did. Hachimecha, it's even easier. You're in a jungle.
Targets come to you most of the time. It was a sad day for Rascal Jester, is all we can say. I'm looking at the scoreboards again, and it just 1-20 in the first game. Kind of set the tone a little
I
bit.
mean, they had to report gang afterwards for giving that one kill.
Obviously DFM played very, very well. Aria on the rise was insane with some of these realm warps just keeping the pressure on non-stop. It felt like Rascal Jester cracked way quicker than we expected them to, and I agree with the whole draft point. We talked about it a lot on the day, so we don't need to rehash it completely, but Rascal Jester just didn't have coherent drafts, and when they did, or when they did draft things that are meant to synergize together, it didn't feel like they were playing towards it, and it was really weird. It just felt like an internal collapse almost.
Yeah. That said, I do want to praise DFM because they very clearly had a series of set plays that they had been practicing on, right? We talked about the Rise Realm War Bunch bot. moving people up to the first Rift Herald,
Mm.
making sure that they have coordinated dives, and they were able to play it over and over again. Now, the big thing that I have to look at this is, yes, it's great that it worked. It's great that you were able to just use your standard plays that we know you've been doing for a long time. This is something that they've been doing for years, actually. Back when Saros was still playing, they would move
Yep.
people up towards the mid lane. And back when we had old Tom Kench, Gang would just bring both people up really early. And suddenly, hey, we suddenly have an extra couple of members at the Rift Herald. I think it's cool that we are seeing the same strategies continue to work for them year after year after year. But I'm curious what happens when they're pushed and when they're not able to make those happen, because it is a point of adaptation that DFM haven't always reacted well to.
I completely agree, and to really extend that point just a little bit further of DFM being map controlled, kind of a map orientated team where they'll try and get around the map effectively. The amount of wins that DFM, when they were still playing with Syros in 2020, before before Aria came along, I'm pretty sure they stole or kind of hoodwinked in a way a win or two just by TPing into the base. Like DFM just going, we lost this team fight. 3 of them just TP into the enemy base and goes,
So
guess we'll win because we can't win any other way. And then they would, and it's like you guys just
It works until it
BM'd.
doesn't.
Yeah, well, no. Well, hopefully it doesn't. Well, it's why DFM never did too well at Worlds, right, Joshi? Like that's the whole reason.
that's part of it. Yeah.
Woo.
The thing that I've always looked at DFM is that they've been by far the most clutch team in Japan. And so even when there are
Yeah.
situations that would otherwise be close, most other teams can't pull it out. But DFM can, and it gets them a lot of wins where they weren't necessarily playing particularly well earlier. And let's face it, the competition in Japan has leveled up this split from Rascal Jester, but it's still going to be a situation where you're now playing the other best teams from their own regions. You can't assume that you're going to be going in and just having a lead at 15 minutes almost every single time like they have this split.
Think
Yeah.
that to particularly just almost briefly call back to the Axis games, though, the
Mm,
very
yeah.
last one they had was a good example of DFM not getting that early snowball advantage and then having to fight back, which, like you said there, they are the clutch team. That's the point of having this many veteran players. It's kind of hard to not be clutch after a point as long as you all have like that coherent voice, whoever's doing the shot calling kind of
Just
thing.
look up Mad Lions in their finals.
Exactly. And that's kind of the parallel I wanted to draw because, fun
Oh,
enough, we
perfect.
both have top lane NAR players who have relatively small champion pools, but win usually by gapping on those champions when people expect the matchup to go one way, but they kind of swing it, which I think coming into international, it really is a fluctuating strategy that can work, and I think particularly the way Ebby does play things like the set and just constantly force early trades to enable just insane top pressure for steal
Mm.
can take a lot of these teams by surprise, because especially in best of ones, if you aren't ready for these set plays, then they will just build up an early lead that enables DFM to get that advantage that you don't really deserve to get when you're against people like Chovy, for example, who would otherwise just stonewall you until they could win later on.
And
Yeah, but
oh, go for it.
I was gonna say, it's also something that if you properly scout, it is something that can be punished, right? There's
Mm.
a lot of times where Evie will go really aggressive at like level 2 and 3, but that is technically in a gank window, right?
Yeah.
It is something that if somebody wants to go with a more aggressive pathing, I think I called it out during the finals broadcast. Like if Trundle had gone red, Krugs, Raptors top, like we've seen a bunch of times over here in North America,
Mm.
that's a gank window, and suddenly Evie is dead because he's been using his hop forward, right? It's a situation where it is higher risk, and Steel has been supporting it rather well, but it's something where if you want to just flip the script even a little bit, it can suddenly put DFM in a very risky spot. So it does have both an upside and a downside based on how he's been playing. Everything anybody does in League of Legends is exploitable if you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, and I love that callback to the Axis series as well from both of you because Axis pushed DFM way harder in their best of 3 than Rascal Jesters remotely did. I mean, yes, okay, there was that 40-minute game in game number 2, but let's be real, lads. Did you ever think Rascal Jester were gonna actually win that game? Truthfully.
No.
There were still 3 deathless players on DFM after the 40 minutes, so it's kind of hard to have said it like it.
There's
No.
always a chance, but like it was gonna have to be like 200 years from Seoul doing something crazy, Kinatsu actually going off, Kinatsu popping off, and honestly, and that's actually a player I want to do because we've been talking a lot about Ebby because I think we're fair in saying he is probably the weakest link at the moment in the former in his team at the moment. Kinatsu had a pretty disappointing series, and he had been the player that solo killed Ebby in that first game of the summer split as they come back, and then Kinatsu kills him, and it's like, well, that's a way to set the stage after you had a successful MSI performance and more eyes on you than ever. Like, okay. And I would say Aino actually pushed Ebby more than what we saw from Kinatsu, which is just an interesting comparison because these are both rookie top laners who have really flourished over this last year. And this isn't to flame Kinatsu or anything or be like Aino did better. Like both these rookies did incredible to even be at this spot.
Absolutely, and I think that it was very clear in the second game with that early Viego versus Renekton fight where they did aggressively force Evie to flash away on the Renekton. I think that one of the areas that we've kind of got to see more than I've noticed at very least in other regions is people actually just bullying Renekton pre-level 3, which kind of flips the script on the whole dynamic of why teams are really picking Renekton early, which I really like to see when teams can get away with things like that. And while it didn't have too many results throughout the weekend out of what was already expected, because, you know, in the one game where we did get the super big lead at level 1 onto Aino, they still ended up that was their best game, I would say, from Aino. They had a massive Renekton game then. So
Really?
coming
Because I
through,
think his gangplank was clutch
it was
as
really
well.
good too. They had a very good weekend. We don't need to go back over that because I agree he had a very good series of games. But back to Kanatsu, they didn't have the most dominant performance. They even had the Camille into Nart in the third game, and I feel like again the team just felt a bit disjointed throughout the whole thing, which means that no individual piece can ever look that strong when the whole unit isn't going forward. Because you can stomp lane, that's one thing, but if you stomp lane and you can't convert to elsewhere because your bot lane solo died, or because your mid lane's getting camped, or because your jungler's not captured a dragon yet, it's not really going to win you the game.
And that was just what DFM were better at doing, right, Joushi? Like they were just better at playing map rotations. Their macro game was just far more defined and set out, and Rascal Jesters just seemed to be lost at level 1.
I agree. Again, to reiterate, I don't feel like the Rascal Jester that we saw during the regular season
Or in
played
that
in this
Juggernaut match.
Yeah, or in that Juggernaut match. I don't think that they played in this series, right? Normally, I've been looking at Rascal Jester as pretty darn good team fighters. They are very coordinated once fights actually start, usually when started up by Secret, but we didn't see almost any of that. It felt like they were scared. It felt like they were nervous. And it doesn't help that their drafts were super questionable, but it was a situation where I think if we were to run this back and it wasn't the series that was going to lead to World, I think it would have been closer overall. And I do agree that like having rewatch Axes at this point, like Axes, they didn't have that chip on their shoulder, right? They were just very willing to play their hearts out and they were willing to go for things, whereas Rascal Jester just felt lost and timid.
And I'm loving that because I want to set up for kind of the last part of kind of looking towards Worlds and everything. So there's a great series of interviews for the post game interview that the official stream did. Hina Lonely Hikamori over on Twitter done her standard translations for us, so there'll be a link down below to everybody to go check out those threads because she translated the post game one for Aria after they got their win over Axis, and then there was one every single player spoke to the broadcast team over in Japan for Riot Games, and then we've got those translations. And I'm gonna just take you guys through a few quotes, and I just want to get your reactions to them more than anything. So Ebby said everyone's biggest dream is to now have a good world showing. So the whole roster now wants to have a good showing at Worlds, and I mean, it's. Do we think where he's saying this, he's hopeful that they will do something that's never been done for the LJL?
Yeah. This is the situation where we're starting to come up where a lot of these players are starting to get old, right?
Yeah.
That's not to say they can't play for a few more years, but this is probably the situation where if they can't do it with this roster, it's
Mm.
probably not happening during their careers, right? And I think that's what a lot of these players kind of realize. They really need to
Mm.
play really hard. They really need to have an opportunity to show what they can do. And 'cause, I mean, when you looked at this, I called this the strongest roster Japan has ever seen. And I
Yep.
still believe that. This is the strongest roster Japan has ever seen, and if this roster can't have a decent performance at Worlds, I think it's gonna be a long time. We're gonna need a new generation of players like the Kinatsus and Ainus of Japan to
Yeah.
step up in order to actually, bring Japan into a stronger situation on the world stage.
Couldn't agree more. This is our 2019 G2, and we saw what they could do. Now it's the time for the LJL to do their equivalent, whether that be making it to groups and potentially breaking through that.
Mm.
Even getting to the groups in the first place, historic achievement, right? We have seen
It's what we're calling for.
non-stop. There you go. It's got to be the time if
Eh,
it's going to happen with this generation of players.
100%, both of you. And then during a little bit later in that interview, apparently calling back to the season, Ebby in the interview said that they had been struggling to get everything to work. When asked about winning finals, he said, "We were trying to fix things one at a time to see if we improve. It was trial and error." So even with Gang coming back in and being on the sidelines for multiple months, right, with Kazu playing instead. I remember in Utapon in his interview, he was like, we basically had to start from step one again. Like with Arya coming in, the team dynamic had changed so drastically. The reason they went 0-3 is because honestly, this was like for DFM and the players, they were like, well, mechanically, we're really good. But everybody else has got team synergy built up. We're starting from step one again. And it took a while. And it kind of explains why you saw a lot of the early DFM games were so messy. What do you guys think about that for DFM? Because this kind of begins the whole summer journey for DFM that they had with Gang, with Exodia all coming together.
Refinement takes time, and
Oh,
building up that synergy has been a long process. We even saw the stumbling over in the Juggernaut match. It's that kind of thing where when it hits, you could see it over the weekend. It hits really hard, and I think we have got a good ceiling for these players right now that
mm,
we can see. And I would very happily say that the ceiling for DFM, with what we've seen from them throughout the split on their massive win streak, what ended up happening, is above the floor of a lot of the teams at Worlds. A
mm,
non negligible amount of them. I would say that if DFM are performing and the other team is doing average, I would easily put DFM as the favourites in a fair few games that most people look at across the world and go, that's a minor region. There's no way they're ever going to be able to contend with this team. There's no way they could ever take a game off of the Fanatics, etc., things like that, where I'm expecting surprises. And now that they've had time to build up that synergy, they have a best part of a month of boot camping, whichever, like doing it half there and half here, however it actually goes with travel kind of things. I can imagine that this team could come into Worlds very, very strong, and because they have that veterancy on so many players, I don't think they're going to be shaken.
Yeah,
good.
I think that's worth pointing out that they're not going to be shaken, but it's also, kind of pointing out the fact that they were able to bring it together is impressive because the roster that comes to mind for me when I see like a team of 5 veterans is Cloud9 Academy. Just because I've been paying so much attention to the scene recently, right? It
Oh,
is
God, that
Darshan,
loss.
yeah,
Oh, God,
Darshan,
that series.
Surenfire, Copy, King, and Isles, and the only one of these players that hasn't had a long professional career at this point is their
Mm,
mid laner Copy, right?
yep.
And Darshan, Surenfire, King, and Islands have all been playing professionally for 5+ years at the highest level in their region for most of it. And they're they struggled really hard during the regular season. They weren't able to figure it out. And sometimes that veterancy, on the one hand, it's really good to be really clutch and really strong at laning and all these things. But sometimes everybody has like very set ideas of how they want to play. So I have to give a lot of props to, the coaching staff, but also the players for being willing to say, hey, we know we're all good at this game. Even though we might have different ideas, we need to come together to make sure that we can come up with something cohesive so that we can be more than just a sum of our parts. And I'm happy to see that they've done it because I know that there are teams that have struggled to do this.
Maybe after during his interview, and I'm moving us on because I have to. Rascal Jester's Juggernaut match loss. When they lost, and then they won 3-0, and when kind of asked about it, this is what Ebby had to say. Honestly speaking, the reason we lost to RJ, looking back now, it was because of motivation issues and the team atmosphere wasn't good. Our practice wasn't effective either. Because we lost to RJ, we will work harder. DFM's owner came down and talked with us too. I'm paraphrasing this a little bit. This is also translation. It's not the full quote. So please, by the way, go over, watch Lonely Hikamori's translation because it's really important to the context. But gentlemen, with that said, DFM had motivation issues. They weren't really feeling like they wanted to. Well, clearly that's what it was, something that I was very much hinting towards in episode 29 of the podcast, or last week's podcast. I was like, I just don't think DFM's mental game was there. I really didn't feel like they were pushed. I was like, there's something that didn't feel right. The fact that DFM had looked unstoppable, and then they came into the series and had 2 good games, but then they also just didn't draft that up. They weren't doing the standard things they had. They weren't moving around the map at all the kind of way that we saw in the rest of this 3-0 that we had today. I'm not surprised that they were having issues because they were probably on top of the world, but it's definitely an interesting quote. What's your reactions to something like that from Ebby and DFM?
When you come in with a 12-game win streak and your most recent win was a tiebreaker match where you just absolutely stomped the team you're about to face, I feel like you have to be a bit overconfident to an extent. You look at the region and go, okay, we're not being challenged right now. We need to be getting something. And that can lead to disarray in its own way. Like, one of the things that I think teams talk about a lot is, oh, when we're winning, it's all good. The atmosphere is great. Mental is all good. But the thing is, when you're winning and winning and winning, but you know you're not the best in the world, you're not the damn one of last year, you have to look forward and go, how do we actually improve when the competition around us isn't up to snuff? And I can see how with so many players that have very high aspirations, they want to hit those aspirations. And if you go into the Juggernaut match thinking to yourselves, this is going to be a wash, I could completely get how they would go into that one with bad mental, everything's just not working together because they just expect to have a walkover.
Yeah, I talked about this at the very beginning of the season when I actually wrote an article on how I was expecting DFM to do because it's so strong. The thing that we got to look at is, yes, we expect them to win, and I'm playing in a rec league right now too, so I get it. There's teams. My team is one of the strongest in the league. There's a couple other teams that are clearly not as good, right? Yeah, we're not. It's not a good league, right? We're looking at like gold plat players, and a bunch of us are washed to like who used to be diamond, and now we just play for fun. But it's a situation where, I make sure to talk to the team and say, yeah, we could screw around in these games a little bit against the weaker teams, but I'm going to challenge you guys to instead, let's see how cleanly we can win these games. How dominant can we actually look? And DFM have historically had issues with that, right? You can try and be more experimental and be more comfortable with other things, but they don't really do that either. They just play the same thing, just less seriously. They just don't have their heads in the game for a lot of these games, and I can definitely see that could affect their mental. So now that they're looking at World and they know they're kind of underdogs, I don't expect them to have those issues again.
I agree. I completely concur with both of you there. I think DFM having some mental issues, it's not surprising. And I think that callback that you made, Joushi, is actually a really smart one because, yeah, absolutely. When you've been an org that's been so dominant, the fact that the owner came down and was like,
guys, what the fuck?
What the fuck? I thought you guys were going to 3-0 this. I thought we were going to have close to we could pretend we had a perfect playoffs because it wasn't a perfect split. So we'll take the perfect playoffs and you guys go and do that. What the fuck? But hey ho, Rascal. But at the end, oh my god, my camera is really just not sure. Anyway, but with that said, ladies and gentlemen, that's DFM. Like, they're going to be our world's representatives. They're the best team in the region. And, gentlemen, was it even close at the end?
No.
No. They're very good at League of Legends, and when you're playing against a team that is either not as good at League of Legends or isn't in the right headspace, they are just going to sweep you.
Absolutely. And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of this podcast. It's just a recap episode. It's just to be a little tidbit. Nymera and Initialize will be back next week joining me for us to talk more further about worlds and everything else. But we wanted to make sure we filled you in while they were on a small holiday break to kind of reset because they've been so busy. I'm going to come over to you first, Melvinizzle. You got anything else you want to plug? You want to say what you've been doing or got any plans for the future or just happy to be here?
Happy to be here for me. Go lay down for a bit.
Fair enough. Fair enough. What about you, Joushi?
Yeah, Proving Grudge is going on here in North America. If you're interested in seeing
watch
where the next series of great players in North America is going to be coming from, we got some great things coming through. Amateur teams beating academy teams. I'll be on a couple times next week, so come out and make sure you check it out. We're going to have a good time.
Make sure you check out both these gentlemen's Twitter. It's below. It's Joshi_TV and Melvinizzle, respectively. Obviously, I'm at MaskedSwan. Thank you so much for watching and or listening, everybody. And we'll see you all very, very soon.